Hello everyone! If you saw our first video in this series, then you've already seen the overview of how our plants were after us being away for months, and leaving them just being occasionally watered. We now want to take you through what it takes to make an entire collection bounce back from this type of neglect, and we're starting with our Oncidiums. They were the ones that suffered the most, I think. And they were placed on this desk, so if we want to do any work on the plants, I have to start by clearing this out. Before we get started with the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We usually post every week, although lately with renovations and moving houses, our posting schedule might be a bit more sporadic. Still, you'll want to subscribe to know when we post a new video. If you enjoy our videos and want to help out maintaining the channel, we have the SuperThanks option activated for tips. So the first thing I did was go through all these plants one by one and see who needs immediate attention. I assume that most of them will need something done, like this one that has some dried up sheaths and old flower spikes that need cutting. This one is that Oncidium Twinkle that was rotting, so that needed to be addressed immediately. And the next two have rotting bulbs as well. This one had a lot of dried up leaves and bits, but the base of the bulb seems fine, so I'm leaving it alone for now. This Maxillaria tenuifolia is in fact not an Oncidium, but since it's here, I might as well clean it up too. I expected the zygopetalums to do so much worse, but this one just has some dried up bits. Probably because, as you can see, it was left with its feet in water accidentally the whole time. So I guess I'm lucky it didn't rot. Our Roseoglossum has an ugly yellow back bulb that really needed to go. And as you can see, it was really soft and squishy, so I applied some cinnamon just to be safe. And of course, always disinfect your tools. I may not show it every time, but please don't forget to disinfect your scissors every time you use them on a plant. Our one and only Miltonia has a lot of dried up leaves to cut off. But if you told me that this one, out of all our orchids, would have survived a hot summer of neglect, I wouldn't have believed you. Like I said in the first video, it wasn't the Miltoniopsis, but the Miltonias that seemed to have suffered the most. This one even tried to flower, but you can also see with all that yellowing that it suffered way more than the other Oncidiums this summer. At this point I still wasn't sure if a repot was in order, or if I just let it bounce back a little before doing anything and risking traumatizing the plant further. Our huge cherry baby seems to be bulletproof. It looks great and it's even flowering, but since it's here I might as well cut off some old spikes and leaves. Here we have some more old bulbs that have yellowed, and I'm again choosing not to repot, and instead cutting them off in the pot and applying some cinnamon to make sure that it doesn't get infected. Our other zygopetalum has some growths that have dried off. And sometimes it's just easier to rip them off than to fit the scissors in there. But, of course, you gotta be careful you don't send the plant flying across the table. This mini Oncidium was mostly okay, but the next one was definitely saving the worst for last. This is my favorite Oncidium, the soatoanum, and as anyone can see, there isn't much of it left that's healthy. This table, like most of the room, is really messy and gross, so some quick cleaning before moving on to the urgent repots. I think I had already mentioned this in the first video of the series, but I was planning on transferring all of the Oncidiums to self-watering setups, so I can keep them in taller shelves in the new house and not have to water them as often. So at this point I had already ordered a bunch of self-watering pots to try out, and try and see what type of pot better suits us. Now that I have a bunch of emergency repots to make, I guess I'm gonna try them all and probably have to order some more. When I have the time, I'm planning on start transferring the whole collection to self-watering, but we'll start with these ones out of necessity. Our big specimen size Oncidium Twinkle has a lot of its pseudobulbs feeling really soft, and a lot of the growths are clearly rotting. I'm hoping that there are separate plants in the pot so we can save at least a small part of it. In case you haven't seen our first orchid recovery video, the reason so many of our Oncidiums have rotted is that we went away for a few months, and even though it was summer and the person who came to water them did as she always does, for some reason they were left with water in the bottom of the pots the whole time, and that's what led to the rot. I'm being careful to not damage the roots of the parts that I hope are still healthy, but everything in that root ball smelled so bad my hopes weren't very high. And with all these plants, I am very aware that I'm going through all this trouble, and there's still the chance that the rot will spread through the parts that seem healthy and the plant will die either way. But I really didn't want to just toss all of these orchids. Out of this section, only this tiny bit is maybe salvageable. And after a lot of patience untangling the roots, we're left with these small sections. I think this pot is the perfect size for this plant. These types of pots already come with a wick, but I bought some more wicking thread, because I feel like these wicks that stay only on the bottom of the pot are made thinking of plants that are in soil, and soil distributes water much better, So my idea to make this work better for an epiphytic substrate is to add more wick that goes up the pot to distribute the water better. It's how I do it with my bulbophyllums, and it seems to work. I think this will work even better because it's a cotton wick. I used to use polyester ones because I saw someone recommend it in a video because the cotton ones do degrade. But I find that the polyester ones stop wicking as well after a while, so now I'm trying cotton. It only has to last the 2 years these plants are potted after all. So I threaded the extra wick on the original one, and I'm placing sphagnum in the bottom, and then potting the plant with bark and more sphagnum. I'm tucking these pieces of extra wick as I fill the pot, and I think like that it will even out the distribution of water from the reservoir. And there. We lost a lot of the specimen plant, and nothing guarantees we won't lose more, but for now, it's looking good. The other Twinkle was way easier to separate the sick part, because this whole section is completely disgusting. The healthier part has some mushy bulbs as well, but the one closest to the rest of the plant seems just dried off, not rotten. So that gives me a little bit more hope. This Twinkle has so little plant left that this teeny tiny self-watering pot should be big enough. It actually didn't come with a wick, so I'm glad I ordered extra. This type of pot only has one hole to put the wick through, but that should be enough. I'll still bring the wick through the bark and sphagnum like the other one. Well, there you go, easy peasy. The only good part of sick plants is that they make for really easy repots. Now the dreaded soatoanum. Seeing how distributed through the plant the rot is, I'm not confident at all that I can save this plant. And it was such a big specimen as well. But I love it so much I have to try. I'll still keep an eye out in case I find a well-priced one, because even if this makes it, it's going to be years before it looks good again. At this point, I think it's just easier to just cut off the healthy parts. And he was still trying to flower, the poor thing. It also smells foul. I can't believe with this smell there was still some green left on this plant. I didn't want to use one of these bigger self-watering pots, so I just improvised something with pots I already had. I have to incorporate a stake, because these two sad little sections don't have any roots. I'm 98% sure that this is going to be a fruitless attempt, but I want to do this for myself because I love this plant, even though it's not the most interesting thing to put on the channel. Trying to balance these growths in a pot with no roots is really frustrating as well. And I'm sure the pot is so small compared to the plant that it could be always toppling over, but I also didn't want to use a huge pot. I even had to clean up the tag because it was also so slimy. These poor plants. Our Samurai Oncidium was already not a big plant, and now it's only left to do a pseudobulb and a new growth. This is another one that I'm DIYing the self-watering setup because I didn't have any more small self-watering pots. I ended up panic ordering a bunch after these repots, thinking there would be more repots to do, and let's say you should never panic order anything without proper testing it first. But this DIY self-watering setup has no reason to not work well. It has the same exact thing, a reservoir on the bottom and a wick going through the media. Finally, I decided I had to address the big Miltonia. I had already lost the other one, and this one was clearly going the same route. Like the other one that died before we got home, the bulbs aren't exactly all mushy and rotted, but some infection is clearly going through the plant and making it yellow and, well, dead. I'm so glad I decided to record this with a voiceover, because the amount of cursing and moaning in the original footage would have gotten this video blocked. I'm also glad I decided against letting the plant recover for a bit before separating the yellow parts, because the smell that hit as soon as I pulled the pot off, it was just indescribable. This whole part here I was sure is pretty much doomed, so I'm going to focus on salvaging this side with more green, I guess. I had to check the tag just to see when this was last repotted, because the amount of roots making my life the hardest. And it was repotted 2 years ago, by the way. So this plant would have given me a hard time this year either way. I separated this clump into 2 parts, because I wanted to take a closer look at the back bulbs and see if I don't keep any infected parts. I also ended up taking a closer look at the rhizome, because ever since the Great Fusarium Panic of 2018, it seems that I always see a bit of purple on the outside of every rhizome. Alas, my visual analysis was inconclusive. More importantly, I can tell that that bigger section, as much as it looks healthy, already has some yellow appearing on the top of a bulb there in the middle. This other part already has one of the newest growths turning yellow and soft as well, so I kept only the other half of it. I went back to the bigger section and cut it up, hoping to salvage some of it. So in the end, I ended up with only a quarter of what I thought was still healthy. I still spray it with peroxide because why not? It still smelled bad, and at this point, not knowing if the infection is bacterial or fungal, it couldn't hurt. For the same reason, I also used cinnamon in the cuts. I'm going to use this transparent self-watering pot I found online that I liked because it resembles our normal pots. I'm adding the wick. I think these were intended to be used with those little feet being the wicking part, but again, I don't think that would work with an epiphyte appropriate substrate, so I'm adding the wick. Even though it still had some roots, this Oncidium also could use a stake, so I'll have to add one later. So, here we are. All the plants that were more urgent are repotted. This is definitely not how I wanted to try the Oncidiums in self-watering, but it is what it is. At this point, I'm pretty sure at least some of these aren't going to make it, but at least I gave them a shot. I think the self-watering setup will also help, because I feel like a consistently moist environment is more conducive to their recovery than a wet-dry cycle. And at this point, it was still very warm here, so a wet-dry cycle is inevitable. I am hoping I didn't use too much sphagnum on these, considering they will be in self-watering, and when we eventually go to the new house, they will also be in a cooler, more humid environment. I think there will have to be a lot of trial and error with the new house. So now all that's left to do is hope for the best and put these guys together with the other Oncidiums all back in their shelves. I did clean up the shelves beforehand, but I'm pretty sure no one needed to see that. Most of the sick ones are small enough that they fit on this lower shelf next to my African violets, so I can keep a better eye on them. Speaking of which, I also need to do a reset/recovery on the African violets. Sometimes the more you do, the more it seems you still have left to get done.
Two months later.
It is now almost 2 months later, and I still haven't touched the other Oncidiums. I know, I feel terrible, but I have not had any time to do it. The ones we did take care of, though, are doing okay. We haven't had any losses, at least. The soatoanum back there is surprisingly still alive. It hasn't done anything and it still looks sick as hell, so I'm not holding my breath. The Samurai Oncidium actually developed a new growth. It's this shrivelly, mangled thing, but hey, at least it seems to be recovering. The two Twinkles are also doing very good. The white ones surprisingly didn't lose any of the sections, and they all look great. There's even some tiny new growths in there. And I can see now the other Twinkle is so happy it decided to flower. I would rather it was focusing just on new growth, but I'll take the flowers. The Miltonia, like the soatoanum, is not doing much. At least it's not shriveling, but I'd like to see some new growth. So I'm not sure I was able to get only healthy tissue with this one. We'll have to wait and see. She's the one in this type of pot, and as I alluded earlier in the video, I panicked ordered a bunch of these, thinking I'd get around to repotting the whole collection. I even ordered in a bunch of sizes. And I'm not loving it. I'm hoping it's just a fit on this particular one, but when I water from above, the water seeps through the gap in between the pot and the reservoir. So I have to only fill the bottom if I don't want to make a mess. I still have to test the other ones I ordered, so I think at some point I'll make a video reviewing all the self-watering pots I'm trying. So that was part 2 of recovering the collection. I was hoping to get through all of the Oncidiums on this video, but life has been chaotic, I'm never home, so we're gonna have to take this slowly. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave us a like if you did, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the series. We'll hopefully see you next week. Goodbye.